All right, welcome back to another episode of Nemo Radio. This is going to be a really fun one. This guest, I always talk about people need to have a unique narrative, a unique story to remember them by. And reading the background of Rory Miller, like there's no shortage of stories here. So Rory Miller is a speaker and coach. He really helps people discover their unique purpose and live it fully. And his system is really built around bringing awareness to who you are, identifying your values, getting the courage you need to live by them, and really then leading yourself, being an incredible leader. And he's a speaker and a coach. And with all that said, I want to welcome you to the show, Rory, and then I want to dive in. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, so good to be here, John. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start with your crazy backstory. So you sent me an email, and I was reading the bio on your site. Kind of just take us through your journey, because you've been through a lot, and there's going to be a lot of lessons in here. So kind of, start wherever you want, however far back you want to go, and then take us forward to where you're at today.
All right, yeah, perfect. So I'd say probably the biggest turning point that's relevant to what we're talking about here, I was about 26, and I was working at a company called Lifetime Fitness. I was just a personal trainer. But I got into a leadership academy there, and one of the exercises that we went through was creating your own personal mission statement. You know, we do that a lot as companies and businesses. There's always a mission and a vision, and this one was really doing it for you. Like, what do you want your life to look like? And one of the books that we read around that time, I don't know if you read it, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of my favorite exercises ever in there is the eulogy exercise, visualizing your own funeral. That was complete game changer for me, because it was, at 26 years old, the first time where I'd really start to think about, like, how do I want to show up in the world? Anyway, so that led me actually into quitting my job at the time. So I did my mission statement at the leadership academy for this company, and probably much to their chagrin after that, I was like, I'm out of here. I got to go do something else.
Yeah, thanks for all the training. I'm quitting. You inspired me to leave this dump. Yeah, so what came next?
Yeah, so I quit that job, and I went into the Army, and I went to join Special Forces. And kind of how this, to back up a little bit, the way this had come up is as I was looking through my mission statement, I started thinking about my unborn daughter. I didn't even have a girlfriend at the time, and I'm sitting here thinking about a conversation I'm having with, don't ask me how I knew I was going to have a daughter. I have 2 now, but I imagined her coming up to me later in her life and being in a similar sort of, fork in the road, and asking me what she should do. And I remember wanting to tell her, like, you need to chase your dreams, you need to live out these things that you believe in. And that was very convicting for me, because I wasn't doing that. So I sort of became aware again of this long lost dream that I'd had of joining Special Forces, and I just made up my mind to go do it. So I quit my job, and a couple months later I was off on my way to basic training and in the pipeline to go through Special Forces training with the Army.
And then what happens at that point? So, because then there's more twists and turns in this story.
Yeah, so it takes about 3 years from the time I started to the time I graduated and became a Green Beret. And then a year later, I was deployed and doing some training, some physical training, and I discovered I have a heart condition. And took about 6 months for us to figure out what it was and really nail it down. And the doctors basically said, you can either have surgery on your heart at 30 years old, or you can get out of the Army. Those are your 2 options.
Yikes.
Yeah, and so, at this point, I had already been on this dream of mine, and I put 3 years in, or 4 years at that point. That was a tough decision, but as I sat and thought about it, it had already started to occur to me, based on some of the groundwork that I laid before, that the military's mission wasn't necessarily my mission, in the global sense of things, and so I decided that getting out was going to be the best option for me. So we started making decisions to make that a reality as well.
Let me pause here, because one of the things that's interesting about your story, and that obviously you've kept overcoming it, and you even shared about, when you were, I'm assuming this is when you're at Lifetime, you're working in gyms, you were unhappy, you were overweight, and struggling, and then got that kind of awakening, go to the Army, totally transform yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, then get hit with another setback, another punch in the face. What helped you through setback and adversity, and what's your advice to individuals that run into setback and adversity in life and business? How do you coach people through that, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I talk about this a lot with people that struggle is mandatory, suffering is optional. Like, we're all going to face issues and challenges. Like, you can't step outside your house or step one step down the path of any new direction you want to go without having some kind of obstacle. It's just going to happen. Whether or not that is something that causes you pain and suffering is 100% up to you. Nobody can get in your mind and make you suffer. That's a choice that you make based on the circumstances that are around you. And so for me, it was just about really living that practice out, like understanding. And I take sort of a spiritual approach to it as well. It's not, I don't really believe that my life is about me. So I recognize that the struggles that I'm going through are on purpose for me to learn the lessons that I have to learn so I can be a good steward or a good coach or a good mentor to somebody else later on. So I really look for, what is the education I can learn from this? And at the end of the day, I mean, let's just make it very simple. When you face a challenge, your two options are quit or keep going. Quitting is not an option, right? I have to keep going. So at that point, it just becomes, okay, well, knowing that, now what decision do I make? And I think probably where most people's suffering come from is they get so attached to outcomes. And I focus a lot. I try to get people to refocus on methods and systems. What do you need to be doing? Don't worry about the fruit of your labor. You don't always control that. I can control if I'm talking to you. I can't control if the power goes out right now. So it's just, focusing on what you can control and making sure that you're doing the best you can there, and not being too attached to the outcomes, because this thing, life will surprise you every time.
Yeah, I love it. Just reminds me of the mindset shift that helped me so much. And the book I talk about a lot is called Psycho-Cybernetics, Maxwell Maltz. But there's a line in there, and to paraphrase it, it's basically what you said earlier. It's like the facts are the facts, but how you choose to feel about them is entirely up to you. The facts are the facts. Like the power went out, the car crashed, you lost the deal, whatever. Like now how you choose to feel about it's up to you. And this is where I see so many people getting stuck. And Napoleon Hill has this phrase, or I think he might even had a whole book about it called like 3 feet from gold. You're quitting right when you're about to break through. And I think it's just so important for people, for all of us, myself included, to be reminded that nobody had an easy path. Everybody has obstacles, and everybody had to overcome. And all these great success stories of different individuals, it really come in and, come into play. So take me through, here's another topic I want to address with you. What are the kind of the core leadership lessons that you've kind of learned and that you share with clients, especially in self-leadership? Because you're a guy, obviously, really had to lead yourself to say, I'm going to quit this job at Lifetime and training, whatever. Like, I'm going to make myself into a freaking Green Beret. Like, that's like David Goggins or, like these types of stories. He's the Navy SEAL guy. But like, what lessons can you share from that journey of how you led yourself and how you got to that level to accomplish something a lot of people would have quit or not followed through to achieve?
Yeah, for me, one of the key things that I loved about that whole process was that the entire time, over the whole 3 years, the goal never changed. It was crystal clear what I was working towards. And everything that I did every single day was about moving towards that end goal. And I think that's what a lot of people miss in their everyday life, is they either don't have a goal or their goal it's not really theirs. And I can tell you a surefire way to identify if your goal is not really yours is if it changes a lot. It's very easy to set a goal based on what my parents said I should do or what my neighbor's doing. I want to have a goal to have a bigger house. Like, if your goal changes all the time, then it is a product of your environment. When that goal is really true to who you are and like that inner being that is that true self, it's not going to change. You're going to always want to be moving towards it. And that's where I try to get people. And it was just so powerful. Quitting was not an option for me because that was the goal I had, but also because if I quit, sort of what happens in the Army after that I didn't want to go that route. And so that was, it made it easier almost to go through all the hard stuff. But that's as far as application you could take to your own life, that's a big one. It's like really getting clear on your goal. And the is it mine question is super powerful because we all have influences. We all have people who want things for us. We all have parents and coaches and mentors and people who want. My mom still bothers me about getting my college degree. I don't know if you have somebody like that in your life, but I run a business. I was I've just done so many things. And my mom's like, are you sure you shouldn't finish college? I'm like, for what? I don't know. So it's really tuning in and identifying that goal that's true to you. That's a huge part of it.
Come on, Mom, he's doing fine. Yeah, but my mom was like that too. I'd be working. Don't you think you should go get a job at the newspaper? I'm like, no, no. But it part of it too. Before I forget, the theme I wanted to roll with was obviously as a coach and a speaker, and especially with your coaching, and you're getting a lot into people's real core, like into the deep stuff. How this is something I'm always fascinated with, because it's so difficult, especially in today's world where everyone online can kind of pose and pretend and be perfect. How do you kind of win people over enough to trust you, to say, okay, Rory, I'm willing to kind of let my guard down and be authentic with you and own my stuff and get into why I'm sabotaging? Like, what's your process for getting a prospective client or even a new client to kind of trust you and let you into their world?
It's so great that the example you used where you talked about like in the world of social media with everybody seeming so perfect. I purposely do the exact opposite. I am very, very transparent about all of the things that I've done wrong. And also, all the lessons I've learned, but letting people know, like I have never learned anything from success. Everything that I've learned is a product of me screwing something up royally. So when I put that content out there, it's very vulnerable in a way of saying, hey, I know this thing now, but I only know it and can help you do it because of how badly I messed it up. And my heart for you is to let me help you so you don't make the same mistakes I made. That's really the intent there. And I think that vulnerability really resonates with people, like you said, because everybody's so used to seeing the highlight reel on social media that when somebody comes out and they're like, hey, look how imperfect I am, it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And I think it's, it sort of kind of, it gets through the know, like, and trust a lot faster that way.
Yeah, and I do that too with a lot of my content. And I think what I've really realized, and someone we both know and like a lot, John Michael Morgan, my business coach and part of a group we're in together, he says, like, offline is the new online. And what he means by that, or what I take that to mean, is really what I'm seeing too is people are craving authentic connection. They're craving someone who is transparent and there's authenticity, and there's a real feeling of, I can trust someone like Rory because he's seen a few things. He's been through, the trenches, and he's come out the other side. The important thing I always tell people when I'm trying to teach them how to be vulnerable with content and putting your personal brand out is, you don't turn it into an episode of Oprah or Dr. Phil and just wallow, right? And like, all your day. Like, you share the journey and the lessons learned and the success. And it's the perspective of, look, I spent a decade figuring this out, making all the mistakes so that you don't have to. You know what I mean? Absolutely. So that you can avoid the painful lessons that I went through. And I think there is something about that, especially in a high trust industry like coaching and consulting, even bringing in a speaker, where people want to feel like, okay, you're real, you're authentic, you're genuine, but you have something of value for us too, right? It's not just, I got my, face punched in a bunch of times in life. It's no, I learned from it. I thrived, I succeeded, I achieved things, and here's the lessons that you can take away from it. So when you meet with someone, what's kind of your process to get them moving forward? How do you diagnose why someone is stuck, and then how do you get them out of it?
Yeah. So, the tagline of my coaching is helping people become the hero in their own story, a warrior for their own cause, and a legend in their own right. And that is actually a framework that I move people through. And to sum it up, the becoming a hero part, that's really about tuning into that inner call, about that person you really are, the things that you've always wanted to do, but you've never said yes to. It's that point of saying, hey, I get where my path laid before me is going. I want to go a different direction. And then once you do that, once you're able to identify that and move into it, then we can transition into the sort of the warrior ethos I have for people. It's deciding the things that you want to fight for, the things you want to fight against, the code that you're going to operate under, and then figuring out how you're going to give your strength to others. And those are the 4 pillars for me of a true warrior. And then obviously becoming legendary is just having that impact that lives longer than you do. And that's all it is being so impactful in other people's lives that they want to continue talking about you after you're gone. And I think that it's something everybody wants to do. I really think one of the biggest things that I do for people is just give them permission to go there. Because most people, at least on my entrepreneurial journey and starting a business and doing sort of the unconventional, leaving a job and going into the military at 26 years old, like there was a lot of people that were kind of like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? You're supposed to do that at 18. And I just never really, I had what I refer to as a respectful disregard for convention. And now I bring that permission to other people and saying, hey, I get it. Those people in your life have the best intent for you, but you have your own path that you want to go down. And I'm here just to tell you it's okay. And to help you deal with some of the bumps that come along the way and continue to walk with you down that path.
See, I love this that you're sharing your journey because it attracts people who want to do the same thing. So I was just reflecting on my own story as you're sharing, and I'm like, I look back at my journey and I'm like, I quit a safe 6-figure day job when I was 37 years old, and I had 3 little kids at home. My wife wasn't working. So it was not a responsible thing to do in the eyes of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I only had enough money for 30 days and 1 client. And it was like, bleep it, I'm going. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to make this happen. And I did, thankfully. But I just still, that attracts a certain type of person. And I think that's one really smart thing you're doing with your personal brand. And by sharing your just natural, real life, authentic story, that's going to attract those people that are like, I need someone to believe in me and help me know I can do it too. And I think that's something that's critical. So let me ask you this, because one of the challenges I always have when I'm coaching and marketing and selling clients, you know, on LinkedIn and getting them leads is, okay, what, you know, and John Morgan taught me this. He's like, sell people what they want, give them what they need. Because I think one of the challenges that a coach like you has, where so much of what you're doing, let's be honest, maybe is under the phrase life coaching, right?
Sure.
Really help. And I'm fascinated by this topic because I wrote a whole book about it called Fired Up. And that was my kind of, you know, Rory Miller attempt to like get people and it was like, it totally flopped. So I'm owning my, you know, bets. And it was because I couldn't figure out a way to give people what it was, here's what you need, but it didn't resonate in the market because it wasn't selling people what they thought they wanted. So I'm just curious, in your own marketing, in your own way, and because I know I have a lot of people listening that are similar to you, right? Where they have such a passion, and if they get to know you, you know, and maybe that's your model, is just getting your name out there in your content and hearing your story, and that attracts people. But what's kind of your perspective on this? What advice would you give someone who is similar to you, where it's kind of hard to just bottle up and put on a shelf exactly what it is you do and who you serve? Like, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, you know, to use the business term, the tripwire, the thing that I do to really engage people in the conversation is everything's focused on discovering your purpose. Is opening that conversation about a fundamental belief of mine, which is that you are uniquely created for something that only you can do.
Yes.
And it is not an out there woo-woo thing. It is an actual discoverable, we can figure it out thing. That's it. Like we got to check that block first. And then once we do that, now we can move into some of the, okay, well now what does that look like in the tactical application day-to-day kind of thing? But the way that I get people engaged in the conversation is talking about purpose. What is your purpose? What are you made for? And more people than not have asked themselves that question.
Sure.
It's not something you talk about at a party on Friday night, but most people have had that question for themselves. And so when I bring it up, it almost seems to flow naturally because it's a thought pattern that everybody's familiar with.
And it's so interesting, Rory, because I just came back at the time of this recording. I was out at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego, 4,000 people all over the world. And I was talking to a lot of people individually. And so many of the people, that was their big pain point. It wasn't, they were coming in at the surface level, I want leads and this and this. But then I was like, well, what's really going on? I was like, I'm not passionate about what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm stuck in a job I hate. And then what was really insightful was a behind the scenes breakfast I went to with a lot of the big name people that were there, speakers and things like that. And it was so interesting, Rory, because the question that was asked at the breakfast, it was like a group discussion, was, what's one thing you learned this year that you wish you knew 3 years ago? And so I thought, being in this room full of kind of big name people, it was going to be tactical stuff. You know, I learned this SEO trick, and every single person, I kid you not, it was something personal. It was something about mindset, personal life, purpose. Several people talked about, and these are big name successful people, I wasn't happy doing my business the way I was doing it. Right. I wasn't fulfilling my purpose. So it's like, I love that you have this simplicity of your marketing. It's brilliant, just one question, like, because when you tap into that emotion, you get into people's why, now they want more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it you know, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, but you know, yes, solving your purpose is an answerable question. Great. But that's like step one.
Right.
After that, it's like, well, now what? Like you're saying, I mean, there's just a million things that come from that. So there's a ton of work to be done. But just in the discovery, I think is a real relief for people for the reason you're saying. I mean, everybody everybody that I know has worked a job that they couldn't stand, or done a thing that they felt like they should do because it was the right thing to do, the responsible thing, like you mentioned with your decision. And, in 2020, we have more options than ever before to do what we feel called to do. It's never been easier to connect with an audience, to make a product, to sell a product. And like I said earlier, I'm just here to tell people they can do it. And then for the people that want to walk side by side with them and make it happen.
Yeah, I say this all the time. We live in the greatest era in human history to monetize your knowledge, to monetize your passion. I'm a child of the 80s, man. I couldn't do this in the 80s. Like, there's no way. Like, for you and me to talk, we'd have to have like satellites and radio stations and big towers and
computer as big as my house.
Yeah, and like I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, the idea of a phone call where I could see you on the other end, like a live video, that was like sci-fi. I mean, that was like no way that was possible. And now we're like doing that with people around the world. So it's like the tools are there, but what's really interesting, Rory, is it is easier than ever, but I almost feel like so few people are doing it because of the mindset, because of not knowing, because of not feeling like there's anyone else that's done it or someone to help them. And that's why I think someone like you is so valuable, right? To help them go, no, this is not just pie in the sky, like, think about it and it'll happen. Like The Secret, it's more like tap into your vision, your passion, but there's practical steps you have to take, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's actually kind of a double-edged sword in that sense, because at the same time that we have all these options, you also have something like social media, where at a glance, you can see how much better somebody else's life is than yours. Yeah. It's very, and I use that very lightly because we know that social media is not reality, but it's so easy, especially because we're our own biggest critics, to get on social media and to suddenly just feel so overwhelmed by how far along everybody else is. And like, you're just like, it's too late, or I'm too old, or I'm never going to get there. And that's, so in the same way that technology is making it easy, in some ways it's making it harder.
Yeah. And that's a great lesson I had to learn early on, that John Morgan taught me. He said, quit comparing your real life, your inner life, to someone else's fake life on Facebook. Like that is not really, they don't really have that perfectly behaved and dressed kids, right? Yeah. Like if you were to drop into that home unannounced at 3 p.m, there would be dirty dishes. There would be dirty, like you said before we got on the call, hopefully Beauty and the Beast isn't too loud in the background because one of your daughters is probably watching it, right? Like it's real life. And so the encouragement I want to have for everyone listening and watching is like, be your true authentic self and own that and share that, because it's going to attract those individuals when we are on social media and go, oh, thank God, like Rory's a regular person. Like this is someone I can trust with my vision, my dream, my brand. So man, kudos to you. It's just brilliant marketing. You have a lot figured out that honestly, a lot of people don't. And I think it's cool that you've got a real system in place. So as we kind of bring this in for a landing, if people want to learn more about you, book you to speak, have you coach them, what are some of the best places to find you online and go deeper?
Yeah. I mean, the first challenge I would issue to people is if any of this is resonating, to just open a conversation. Just find me on Facebook and shoot me a message. I mean, let's talk about it. I understand how a lot of people can be sort of on the fence about this, but there's nothing that lights me up more than engaging with people on these conversations. Because here's the deal. There are enough people out there faking it. I want to engage with the people who are really willing to say, I don't have it figured out, but I know that where I'm at isn't it. Those are the conversations I live for. So find me on Facebook. I think it's rory.tyler.miller. And Instagram is the Rory Miller. You can find me, send me a message. I'd be love to engage with people. And then obviously my website, rorymillerbrands.com. If they want to book me or just open a conversation about coaching, there's some forms on there they can fill out. They can also, like you said, they can get a little bit longer biography if they want to read a little bit more about my story. And yeah, I would just love to connect with people that way.
It's great stuff. And there is even more on Rory's site. Like, you're not going to get more transparent and vulnerable than what your story is incredible, man. And it's Rory, for those listening, if you're on a mobile device, and I'll put links in the show notes, but it's RORY and then Miller, like the beer, MILLER. It must be Friday afternoon. I'm thinking of beer. Sorry. But Rory Miller, rorymillerbrands.com, rory.tyler.miller on Facebook. Correct. Okay, I'll get these links into, and on Instagram, the Rory Miller. Just fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, John, it's great connecting with you. Thanks for having me.